Okay, this is the first in a series of lessons for developing bass drum control, and specifically what I'm talking about is groups of 3 or more notes played within the context of a groove. Most of us can play single notes where we want, and doubles aren't too difficult, but when it starts getting into larger groups, then it gets kind of tricky. So there's some exercises that I've been working on and I'm still working on that I want to share with you in a series of videos, and rather than cram all the exercises into one video, I'm going to break them down and give them you individually. Now, the reason for this is to kind of get across the point that technique isn't something that you can acquire by just knowing the knowledge of what it is that you do. If you're unable to open and close your hand, I can't tell you how to do that. I can show you, but I don't know how I'm doing it. So, you know, there's all these muscles in your hands and your feet that you can do certain things with, and you can say, oh, move that so that that's more in line, and move that in a straight line, and all that kind of thing. But the actual mechanics of doing that are kind of even unknown to you. So you can say, try and move your stick straight up and down in a line, and that requires a whole bunch of different muscles to do various different things. And really, the acquisition of technique, as much as learning to move the right things, it's stopping all the extra stuff that isn't required. It's kind of the removal of unnecessary movements, and there's stuff that goes on in your brain to suppress using all these other things that are unnecessary, and that's kind of when you end up with efficient technique that looks easy, because you're doing the most efficient thing to achieve the goal. And the only way to get there is through practice, a lot of practice. You know, I've been playing for 20 years. I'm still always working on things to try and get my hand technique sorted out, and my feet get even less attention than my hands. So these exercises are basically designed to give yourself more control of your bass drum foot. But my point is that this exercise in this video is something that you should work on for like half an hour at a time, or even 10 minutes at a time, whatever it is, like a chunk of time over the course of a few weeks or months. You can keep coming back to this one exercise, and what we're aiming for is to make this exercise feel so easy that you can do it in your sleep, you can do it perfectly in time, you've got perfect control over everything that's going on. So basically it doesn't feel like a chore. Say that you've got mental CPU power that's required to do things and make sure that they're accurate. We want this to use a very tiny amount of that. So whereas you feel probably quite comfortable going like this, when it comes to doing that on the bass drum, it's a more difficult thing to do. And it's just because you've done a lot less of it on the bass drum. So this first exercise in this lesson is basically just going to be playing consistent 16th notes on the bass drum to a click, and changing the dynamic level and experimenting with where your foot is on the pedal. So I put up a video recently that you can access on YouTube or on my website. I have 2 videos on bass drum control. One of them is an hour-long video in the masterclass on my website, which has all sorts of exercises and thoughts on heel down, heel up playing, and all sorts of stuff like that. And then there's a follow-up video where I talk about how I think about playing the pedal now, in terms of, you know, which part of my foot I use on the pedal and how I prepare the stroke and things like that. You'll find those in the links in the description of this video. So you probably want to check those out first. And today's lesson, I'm going to use Polynome, which is an iPhone app. I'll include a link to that too. And I've set it up to play 3 bars of quarter notes and then a bar of rest. And this allows me to, while I'm practicing, work on playing in time with the click, and then check that I stay in time when the click disappears. So that's kind of improving my internal timing at the same time. And because I've got it in a 4-bar loop, I can also easily keep track of how many bars I've done without necessarily having to count the bars. So I've got this set to 80 BPM because this is a tempo that I kind of feel okay with. And I'm going to set this going and just going to play 16th notes on the bass drum, and I'll have the foot cam on so you can see. If you check out the other videos, you'll see why I'm not wearing any shoes and socks. And I'm just going to experiment with moving my heel up and down, moving my foot up and down the pedal, making sure my toes are out of the way. And then I'm going to try and play dynamic curves. So I'm going to start quiet and get loud, go from as quietly as I can play it to as loud as I can play it and back down. All sorts of things, just trying to stay in time with that click. Now, that may be too fast for me. It felt kind of awkward. There were places where I felt that two notes came too close together. In the gaps where the click stopped, I was usually rushing rather than being late. But I did that then for like a minute or something. And what I'm saying is you should sit down and work on this for 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And it'll be a real workout. And you'll really feel it in various parts. You might feel it in your back for trying to keep your leg in the air. You might feel it in your shin. You might find that your toes tense up. You might find that your foot tenses up. So the more you do this, the more you'll be able to play around with different things and move your focus from, how your muscles in your leg feel to how relaxed your foot is, and try making them tenser or more relaxed. And just basically every different aspect of playing this that there is, in terms of where you're touching the pedal, how much you're letting it bounce, how high your heel is, how much tension you've got in your leg, all those things. As you're playing it, change them, do more of it, more tension, less tension, and see how that affects how it feels. And over time, this will get easier and easier. Now, it may be that if it's awkward to play at the tempo you've got, you might find that if you go a few BPM slower, it gets easier. But you may also find that if you go a few BPM slower, it gets more difficult, which seems kind of weird. But when you're playing the bass drum, you have a few different things that all have to work together to get this constant cycle of motion. There is the spring tension, which has a kind of natural frequency at which it wants to move. There is, your ankle, which will be kind of maybe comfortable fluttering around at some tempos, but not so much at others. You've got the rebound of the beater off the head. So sometimes, you take something down just 1 or 2 BPM and it gets a lot more difficult. You suddenly have to start using your leg more than, using the bounce of the thing. I mean, to give you an extreme example, there's a speed at which the beater will bounce off the head and come back here. Now, if the next stroke is going to be later than the natural kind of motion of this, let's say you play a stroke like this, and then it comes back here, and if you need to wait before you play the next stroke, then you've got to do something with that beater. So normally, if you're playing slow strokes, you just kind of stop the motion, and then start a new one. But there's a point at which they need to start to join together, and that is the point where if you move a few BPM in either direction, you've got to move from playing full strokes with your leg to playing strokes where you're utilizing the rebound and the bounce and stuff like that. And also playing at different dynamic levels will affect the tempo. So I recommend working at this at all sorts of different tempos. Try and locate the highest tempo that you can do it comfortably. See how long you can go at that tempo for. Maybe try a few BPM higher and see what happens when you go a few BPM higher. Do you find more tension in certain places? What is it that means that your max tempo is whatever it is? Take it down and try and find the tempo at which it stops being something that you can bounce and keep as a constant thing, and where you have to start playing more with your leg and killing the stroke. Basically just experiment and see how you go about playing these streams of 16th notes. So that's basically it for this exercise. So it seems like a really simple thing, but I really want you to go and really delve into the mechanics of this and just experience it for long periods of time. And you know, in doing that, you will get more and more familiar with it, and it will become more and more comfortable. And then in the next exercise, we'll incorporate some other stuff. So you may want to check out my masterclass lessons, which are at joecrabtree.com/masterclass. That's where you'll find the hour-long bass drum lesson and loads of lessons on learning solos, techniques, lots of in-depth discussion about the mechanics of drumming and, you know, mental approaches to things like that. You can check out my Facebook page and my blog. They're all linked to from my website. So check out joecrabtree.com, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.